Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative, or CTNC for short, webinar. The plot thickens, from empty space to tree nursery, and it's lovely to see you all. I'm Hilary, for those who haven't met me before, and work for Fellowship of the Trees, and I'm the coordinator for the CTNC. So for those of you who are new to the collaborative, I will just introduce it for you. It's a peer-to-peer learning network that enables community tree nurseries in the UK to share good practice and discuss common issues and challenges, and hopefully to build community between those involved. I've pasted a few useful links for you at the start of the chat for further information on the CTNC, in particular how to register to be on the mailing list and be updated with useful events and resources. So on to tonight's session, which is focused on how to go about converting an empty plot, whatever size or type, into an effective, safe and healthy community tree nursery. We have two lovely speakers, Ellie Brown and James Cleaver, who I'll introduce before they speak. And just to add, if you can remain muted at all times, unless you're asking a question after both the talks have completed. And we will then invite you to use the raised hand in the reactions or insert your question into the chat. So now to our first guest speaker, Ellie Brown, who is from the Ribble Rivers Trust in Lancashire. And as a charity that plants tens of thousands of native trees each winter, the Trust was keen to grow some of their own local provenance trees. So in 2021, Ellie set up 3 community tree nurseries with help from volunteers, using mostly reclaimed materials to reduce the environmental impact and cost of setting up the nurseries. Hi Ellie, how are you? And thank you for being here.
Thank you. It wouldn't let me unmute.
Oh.
I'm good, thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Over to you, Ellie.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Can you see that okay? Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Ellie Brown. As Hilary said, I work for an environmental charity that's called Ribble Rivers Trust. We are based in the northwest of England and we cover part of the Yorkshire Dales and then also quite a chunk of Lancashire as well. And our aim is to improve the Ribble catchment, so that's all the rivers that are within the catchment and the land that surrounds those rivers. And we want to do that for the benefit of wildlife and people. And as Hilary said, we plant tens of thousands of trees every winter in locations where evidence suggests they could have the greatest benefits for people, wildlife and the environment. And we wanted to grow our own local provenance native trees to plant in our woodland schemes. We've always worked extensively with volunteers, and historically those tasks that they work with us on have often been very physically demanding tasks, and they're often in really rural parts of the catchments that are perhaps the easiest to get to. And in 2021, last year, we were awarded some funding from the government's Green Recovery Challenge Fund, and that was so that we could create a programme of projects that encourage people with health and wellbeing issues to get involved with local environmental projects in locations where both the people and the environment could benefit most from those projects. So a slightly different angle on our work to what we've done previously. And one of those projects was to set up 3 community tree nurseries in urban areas or areas that are quite easily accessible. And we were aiming to try and build a volunteer base at each nursery who could help us to run those nurseries. So we thought long and hard about whether to plant the trees in the nurseries in beds or whether to grow cell-grown trees. And for now, we've opted to go for cell-grown trees. And as Hilary said, we wanted to have as small an environmental impact as possible while we were setting up the tree nurseries. So we used as many reclaimed and repurposed materials as possible. So first off, we created some wooden planting boxes, which we built from hardwood pallets that had been donated to us. And we also had some of this metal Harris fencing left over from one of our other environmental projects. So we just cut the wire out of that and reused that to build planting boxes, which we then treated with some environmentally friendly wood treatment. And these planting boxes are 1.2 by 1.2 metres. Some more pictures of them. And we had a few criteria when we were designing our planting boxes. Firstly, they had to allow the pots that the trees were in to freely drain so that the trees wouldn't get waterlogged and rot. So there's actually a layer of mesh a third of the way up the planting box. So the box is made up of 3 layers of pallet wood, and there's a layer of mesh in between the bottom and the middle tier of wood. And so the pots sit on top of that mesh and the water can drain out the bottom of them freely. But that also means that nothing can get up under the pots. So there's a layer of that Harris fencing mesh, but then a layer of rodent mesh on top. So no little mice can get up into our pots. And then if you look at the picture on the bottom left, we also put some lids on these planting boxes, which means that nothing can come down and eat our seeds as well. And those lids are actually removable because we don't need them to be on the boxes the whole way through the trees kind of life cycle. So each of those planting boxes, which are 1.2 by 1.2 metres, they can fit a few hundred saplings in. So you don't need a huge amount of space to grow cell-grown trees. And we wanted these planting boxes to be suitable for each stage of the tree's life. So in the centre, you can see we've got pots which have batches of seeds in them that were overwintering in one of these planting boxes with some rodent mesh on top. I did leave the trees in there a little bit too long. You can see the sprouting, but we've still got a good number of trees out of that. And when they're in seed trays, you can have the lids over the top. But once the seedlings start to germinate and grow into saplings, things aren't as interested in eating them anymore as when they're just a yummy little seed. So we didn't need to put those lids on the planting boxes anymore, and it gave the trees much more space to spread their leaves. So we wanted to grow cell-grown trees rather than planting the trees, sowing the seeds and growing the trees in beds. And that's because, partly because we want to work with volunteers at every stage of the process. So work with volunteers to harvest the seeds from local ancient woodlands, work with volunteers to sow the seeds and to extract the seeds out of the berries and then sow them and then pot on any seedlings that germinate and then tend to the saplings. And then we work with volunteers to plant the trees into the woodlands that they're going into. So it's just, we felt it was a good way to protect the roots as much as possible from this handling by multiple different people who will undoubtedly have different skill levels or dexterity levels and this kind of thing. And also it makes them quite portable if they're just cell grown. And we didn't want to create a demand for plastic products by buying new seed trays and plant pots. So we approached local plant nurseries and local people, and we were donated thousands of pots and seed trays, which was brilliant. Biosecurity, give them a wash. They didn't all come to us clean. And again, drainage is key. So you can actually use other pots. So those kind of single yogurt pots, they're a really good size, but you need to drill holes in the bottom of them to allow the pots to drain, which is time consuming, and it does create lots of little bits of plastic that you need to clean up carefully, but you can use all sorts so long as that they can drain freely. But local plant nurseries, they often just send these things to landfill. If they can't wash and reuse them, they'll go to landfill. The one that's just down the road from our office sends a skip full to landfill every year, so we were happy to be able to make use of them. So this is how we grow our cell-grown trees. We were looking at root trainers, and we didn't want to buy loads, but we were thinking, how can we create something similar? And we were donated loads of square pots from a plant nursery. We specified the size of pots that we would find useful, so we didn't get a load that wouldn't be of use to us. And some of those square pots were quite sturdy, and some of them were quite flimsy. So we just cut up the flimsy ones, made some little inserts, popped them into the sturdier square pots, and so effectively split those pots into 4, so that in each of the pots we could grow 4 saplings. And that was to save space, to reduce the amount of pots that we'd need, but also to reduce the amount of compost that we need as well. So just trying to be efficient in how we do things. And we're going to need to wait and see whether anything needs potting on. Some species are doing particularly well like this, like blackthorn have done quite well, whereas others are looking like they might need a bit more space, like the oaks. And some didn't grow as much as we would have expected or hoped, but it was a particularly challenging year with the drought that we had over summer. Note on compost, when we noticed when we had sowed a load of acorns last year that those that were sowed in quite fibrous compost that held on to the moisture quite well, a lot of them rotted, whereas those that were in compost that was a lot more freely draining, they did a lot better. So that's just an observation we made from one winter, but it might be worth bearing in mind. And we always go for peat-free compost, I should say, as an environmental charity. One thing we're trying at the moment now as well is we've made some large seed trays out of these underbed storage boxes with lots of holes drilled into the bottom of them for drainage. And they're quite sturdy rather than flimsy ones, so they're less likely to crack when you drill the holes in them, and we'll hopefully be able to reuse them year on year. And we also put lids on them, again with lots of holes in them to allow rain to drip in, but also air to circulate a bit better. And that was mainly to make them predator proof, because we had just sowed lots of lovely seeds in them and we were a little bit concerned about mice and birds getting in. And it seems obvious now, they acted like mini greenhouses. So some species like witch elm absolutely thrived in them. They shot up and there was just absolutely loads of them. Whereas other species like birch didn't really like them so much. I don't know whether it got a bit too hot in there, or maybe we'd sowed them a bit too densely, but it's something that we're going to keep experimenting with. And we've also found it's a good way of keeping different batches of seeds separate, which could be good for biosecurity reasons. I'm going to try some other seeds sown in them this winter and see how they fare. But one thing I have noticed that we've kind of left the lids on them the whole time, and the trees that are still in them are only just starting to, their leaves are only just starting to turn yellow, whereas the trees that are not in these little greenhouses have lost their leaves, so they are a little bit behind in that sense. So a learning point for me is to take the lids off sooner. Otherwise they might not get cold enough and go dormant. But they were exposed to last night's frost because they didn't have the lids on, so hopefully they'll become dormant soon. Makes them quite easy to transport around as well when they're in these big boxes. So looking at our actual nurseries, we have 3 of them dotted around Lancashire. This one in Marsden Park, which is in Nelson in Lancashire. This is the biggest of our 3 nurseries. It's got about 2,500 trees growing in here, and as well as some seeds that have been sown in seed trays and will hopefully germinate next year. I'd say the plot of land that makes up the nursery is about 9 by 17 metres, and of the actual floor space, I would say less than a third of it has trees growing in it. But we have 2,500, so I would say this nursery, although not massive, probably has capacity to grow maybe around 7,500 trees as an estimate. So you don't need a huge amount of space. And we have an agreement with the local council. We walked around the park with them. They showed us some areas of land that they weren't really, they didn't have plans for, or they weren't particularly being used, and so they thought it might be suitable for the nursery, and we settled on this site. Again, we tried to use as many reclaimed materials as possible to set up this site. So we had some fencing materials left over from another one of our projects, and we bought a refurbished and cleaned out water butt, which not only more environmentally friendly, but it's also cheaper. And we bought this big tool store, and we were really keen to set up a rainwater harvesting system to reduce the environmental impact on drawing from the water network, but also because there isn't really another water supply there, which was an issue in summer when there was no rain for months. And in all our nurseries, everything is exposed to the elements, except for those that are in the little greenhouse boxes, but I might just cover those with rodent mesh going forwards. And that's to receive all those natural triggers that they need to go into a dormant state and then to germinate and so on. The positives of having a tree nursery in a public park, a really well used public park, it turns out. And in this location is that it receives quite good levels of sunlight, but it's also quite sheltered from the wind, so it's quite good for the trees. They don't get too battered by the weather. The ground is nice and even, and it must drain quite well because it doesn't get too boggy. But also around the park, it's just surrounded by houses. So we've got regular volunteers who came to our volunteering sessions here, and they regularly water the trees and they keep an eye on them. And we've set up a WhatsApp group so we can all keep in touch about who waters them and when, and I can ask them how they're doing and so on. And that's been really good. That was critical, really, in making sure that they survived the drought over summer, because we could see when people had watered them or not. Being in quite a large urban area, in a public park, it's quite accessible by public transport, which is good for those who are perhaps less mobile or don't drive but might want to come and help out at the nurseries. It's also quite even ground, which is good for those with mobility issues. And we've actually spread the planting boxes out to account for the fact that someone in a wheelchair might want to come and volunteer at the nursery, so there's space for wheelchairs and pushchairs to go around the boxes as well. It's also a really visible site. When we were setting it up, people were warning us that, the local people will nick everything because they dig up the bushes in the park and take them home. But we've had no issues so far, thankfully. Hopefully it continues. But I think part of it is that it is such a visible site, and often when we're there, people will come up and talk to us and ask what we're doing, and then they'll become quite interested. And even if they don't want to volunteer at the nursery, they seem to care about what's going on and they want it to do well. And our contact details are on the gate, so that's more people to keep an eye on it and tell us if something has happened to it, which, as I say, thankfully nothing has yet. And also being a council site, the council, if you talk to them very nicely, will cut the grass, which is great. In terms of the negatives of this site, we did need to build it from scratch. There was no infrastructure to support a tree nursery there. And we also needed to buy in all the tools that were required to run the tree nursery sessions at the site. There is no water supply, but there was a fire hydrant in the road just over the fence. So when our water butt wasn't being refilled in the drought because there was no rain, we had to actually get the fire service in a couple of times to fill up our water butt, which was very, very kind of them and saved our trees. And also it's very popular with dog walkers, is that area, so they seem to quite like letting their dogs into our self-contained unit and letting them run about, but it hasn't caused any issues, thankfully. As one tip, we use chicken wire on our fencing because that's what we had lying around, and we assumed because there was no livestock in the area that could bash into it that it would be fine. And it is keeping those smaller animals out that would nibble our trees, but people go and smack their footballs against it and dogs run into it, and so it is looking a little bit unsightly after it's had a few knocks, but it still serves its purpose. Again, an environmentally friendly tip to prevent the grass growing up in the middle of the planting boxes. We've just laid loads of plain cardboard in the middle of the boxes, and I don't actually have an after photograph, but once the rains finally came this year and all the cardboard boxes disintegrated, there's no grass growing up in the middle of the boxes anymore, which is great. And this was a little tip I was telling James earlier. Initially we'd grouped all our oaks a little bit too close together, so the air wasn't circulating well enough around them, and so they had a bit of a problem with mildew. And I did some research on the internet and found that if you spray a mixture of milk and water on your plants that have got mildew, it clears the mildew up. It just changes the pH of the leaves enough that it can't grow anymore, and within a few weeks it's gone, and it worked wonders. So it's very low cost and very low impact. The second of our tree nurseries is at a space that's called Tinkerbrook Community Interest Company, and that's in Oswald Twistle, again in Lancashire. And this is an existing growing space that's run by another charity, and they run a service for adults with learning disabilities who can't work, but they can use this service to come and learn life skills such as horticulture. And what we did here is we adapted our methods to meet the needs of those service users. So, for example, we did have some root trainers that we used here because they found splitting those square pots up with the inserts just a little bit too fiddly because some of them had limited dexterity. And some of those root trainers were ones that we'd repurpose, and others we acquired through an application to More Trees and through their cops in a box campaign. And we couldn't use the wooden lids with the rodent mesh here because they can be a bit sharp and it wasn't really safe. But they don't really have a problem with mice and rats here because I think there's lots of cats nearby. But they do have a problem with pigeons raiding everything that they plant. So we put some bird netting over, and it seems to have done enough to deter them. So in terms of the positives or the pros of this site, because it was an existing growing space, there was already a lot of the tools that were needed to set up the nursery. There's a water supply on site because there were people there most days or every day during the week. The trees were watered regularly, and so they were really thriving to begin with. Some of the service users that use this space absolutely love sowing the seeds and tending to the trees, and some of them come in on days, especially when they're not meant to be there, when they hear that the tree people are coming in. So that's really nice that you can provide this activity that people genuinely really enjoy. And also it's a site where you don't need to mow the ground underneath them, which is fantastic and a big help. But a slight downside is that due to the nature of the site and the people that use it, it's not publicly accessible. So you can't just take anyone in to volunteer who isn't a service user at that site. And also there's no one there at the weekend, which means that they did suffer a little bit during the drought. So it is worth arranging for someone to visit on weekends during periods of hot and dry weather. And I would say at sites like this, if it's an existing growing space, it is really useful to have one person who leads on looking after the trees and organises other people to do things on certain days, but also organises someone to cover for them if they go on holiday, as we found that could be a little bit of a problem. Only a little one though. And last time I visited, they'd moved the trees to a location that was a bit overcrowded and partially shaded, and so the trees stopped doing quite as well. So I'm sure you know this, but don't put them somewhere where they're going to be in competition with other plants. I need to speed up because my time's up. Our third nursery is at Lancaster Uni. So we had discussions with the uni about where was the best location for this one in terms of where would be most accessible. And so the nursery is at their Eco Hub, which is an existing growing site, which means, and they grow loads of vegetables and all sorts, which means it's got really good infrastructure in terms of water supply, indoor and outdoor spaces for working, lots of tools. It's very accessible by public transport because it's at the university. And also there's lots of students and their Green Lancaster volunteers that come and help out. But because it's an existing growing area where there's lots of food that's been grown, it means there's loads of voles and mice, and they absolutely devoured our first batch of seeds that we sowed here. And after that, we adapted our planting boxes so they were wildlife proof, which makes me feel bad. I work for the environmental charity. But also there's a lot of vegetation to contend with, and it wasn't really maintained and kept short. So we need to do a little bit of ground prep, I think, before next spring, perhaps lay down some of those cardboard boxes to prevent growth of the vegetation. And we've also found that because it's not right by someone's house and someone doesn't walk past these as part of their daily dog walk, we've struggled to get anyone who'll keep an eye on it on a regular basis. And so the trees here haven't been as well looked after as they have at the other sites, but they're still doing okay. We involve volunteers at every stage, so putting up the fencing around our nursery that's in the park, actually pulling apart the pallets and building the planting boxes, and drilling the holes in the drainage holes in the little underbed storage boxes, actually laying the surface that our tool store goes on. And we found that different volunteers very much enjoy doing different jobs. Some absolutely love working with the trees, others enjoy the more manual aspects. So there's something for a range of people. I just wanted to show you this nerdy spreadsheet where we keep track of everything that we collect. So what species, where we collected it from, what date, was it an ancient woodland, how many were there, and then we can keep track of germination rates. And that can help us to plan into the future. So if we know we want 300 oaks in 2 years' time, we know that we might need to collect 400 acorns to get 300 oaks out of them. And also, if there's any issues with disease or trees that are particularly weak, we can trace back to where they came from. So it's quite good for biosecurity reasons as well. I'll stop there because I've run over quite a bit. But we will be extending 3 tree nurseries next year. We've been awarded some funding to do that, and we're hoping to set up 2 new nurseries. So I'm hoping, based on everything that we've learned in this first year of setting up these nurseries, that we'll actually be able to triple our tree production. And I'm really happy that we're continuing them, because it's actually quite a small part of my job is this tree nurseries, but it's one of my favourite things that I do. And yeah, I love it. So if anyone has any questions, my email address is on screen, but I can also pop it in the chat as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I love the nerdy spreadsheet. Thank you for adding that in. That's wonderful. So if you've joined after we did the introduction, just to let you know that there's 2 guest speakers. So that was Ellie Brown speaking, and the second guest speaker I'm just going to introduce, who's James Cleaver. And we will be taking questions after James has finished. So we'll invite questions after he's finished his talk. So I'd just like to introduce James. James is from the Salhouse Community Tree Nursery in Norfolk, which started in November 2020, and whose mission statement is to produce trees and shrubs to give something back to the environment and community, leaving a positive legacy, connecting people to nature, sharing knowledge and skills about trees and the environment in a safe and friendly group of volunteers. And James himself has said that he's been experimenting with growing trees from around 2018. And I think that's it for my introduction for you. So if you'd like to make a start on your talk, James. Thank you very much.
Just going to share the screen. Can you see that okay? Yep. Right, hello everybody. See, I'm James from the Salhouse Community Tree Nursery. We set up, I've got loads of pictures here. The first slide after this is quite text heavy. It's just to give me an aide-memoire, to give you kind of an overview, but after that it's loads of pictures, and I prefer pictures as well. So, so let's see here. Our model, we don't sell any trees, we just grow them and then we advertise them for free to give out to local residents to encourage tree planting, and also look to work with local landowners to again encourage tree planting. So it's run by myself and purely 100% voluntary run. I've got a mailing list of about 60 people now, which this year I've been a bit rubbish with, but previously I would give monthly updates to say this is what we've been up to, a couple of pictures, and these are the volunteering sessions, and quite often they'd be on a Saturday morning from 9 till 12. We've been growing now for 2 seasons. This last summer was our second growing season, and in last winter, we gave out 460 trees and shrubs. This winter, we've got 1,100 ready, and we've already found homes for about 600 of them. The nursery, we've got two parts of the nursery. One is called the home nursery, which is funnily enough at my house. It's just actually round the corner here. And that's root trainers with benches made out of pallets and old blocks. And then the farm nursery is bare root growing up at a farmyard just local to us, actually. I was really lucky. To begin with, I was thinking, where am I going to set up this nursery? And it just so happened there was a chap called Trevor who'd just set up a farm, and I went and chatted to him, said, this is what I want to do. And he said, that's great. There's 1/3 of an acre over there. And just for context, 1/3 of an acre is massive, and we don't use anywhere near that much. So we started with a huge area, and now we're just using a small portion of it. So that's the farm nursery, and that grows bare root up at Black Barn Farm in Salhouse. In terms of financing, we've had financial contributions to buy materials from Broadland District Council, from Norfolk County Council, and because it's kind of something I really want to do, if I need something, I just buy it for myself anyway. The materials, we've also had gifted materials from individuals and companies, and I'll point those through as I go through the slides. So the farm nursery started literally with a ploughed up field, and you can see this is probably about February of the first winter, and if you can see my mouse here, that is a line of acorns in there, but that was the mast year. It was probably the mast year throughout the whole of the UK, and we planted the rows. They were 10 metres long, 1.2 metre wide beds with a metre walkway in between, and I planted, well, with some volunteers, we planted about 3,000 acorns in the ground, and they got absolutely mullered by mice and rodents. And in fact, you can see, let's go to the next slide here, part-eaten acorns, and you can see top right there where there's little holes in the ground. Literally, I think the mice turned into farmers. They figured out if they just kept on walking and digging down, they'd find the acorns. So then I approached a local roofing company, and I said, I asked on Tree Planting UK what people would recommend, and they said cover it with slate. So I spoke to a local roofing company, and they gave me some old slates, which, although they're kind of falling apart, were free. I just went and picked them up, and we armoured then our oak acorn beds. You can see bottom right there that actually the mice, they'd got an appetite for the acorns here at this point, so they were burrowing underneath. But after a while, you can start to see the little acorn shoots come through, and then we took off the slates, and so then you can see top left, that's the nursery developing. I was worried about birds coming along because tender shoots of new trees and shrubs coming through, they're at the beginning of spring, they're quite appetizing for wildlife, things like birds and fowl. So I protected it with nets, and that's 25mm blue water pipe, and then netting. Now that green netting, one bit of advice on green netting is go for the fruit netting which is quite fine holes, because I found previously I'd bought quite large holed nets which were probably about 25mm holes, and sadly when I was using them in the garden here, a couple of birds got caught up, so I quickly whipped that off and changed it to this. Top right you can see some blackthorn seeds chitting there, but unfortunately the mice came, and you can see bottom right that when I pulled up one of the slates, I found they'd been carrying them off under the slates and having a real good little meal under the slates as well. The next picture is, a few of you are going to frown at me here, but to begin with I was like, okay, let's give the mice some food. That's okay. We can live with some losses. We've got 3,000 in there, but actually they did turn me into a cold-blooded killer. So with the boxes you see on the left there, I did actually start to put some traps down as well, just to knock back the local population. And my thought is that, okay, so I might take a few down here, but overall what we're going to create elsewhere is for the greater good. And you can see that this is after the slates have been lifted here, when you can just start to see the shoots coming through. And then things progressed. The trees grew. You can see their sweet chestnuts and lots of oak, and we held the netting down with roofing battens, you can see there. But then the thing is, you've got to get the nets off to get in there and do some weeding. So it's a bit labour intensive. But then because 2021 was a very wet year, the weeds really grew. And we found that was a massive demand in terms of getting this down. And I think with hindsight, I would have prepped the walkways by putting down some kind of weed suppressant and wood chip. With maybe a timber rail both sides just to keep that down. But that was a major demand of volunteers' time to weed. That's maybe why I haven't got so many volunteers this year, was because there was so much weeding to do the previous year. But after we'd tidied it up, it looked pretty good. We had 3 IBC water tanks donated to us by British Sugar. We just had to collect them, which again, someone with a local van came and helped us with. So in the farm here, for context, this is over the back of a new orchard the farmer has planted. And so we're really remote to water. So that was one challenge. But he very kindly said, I've got my forklift, I'll fill up tanks for you for water as you need them and just drop them over near you. So that's really useful. In terms of water, actually, we've only used 2 tanks of water this year because we didn't actually have to water that much. Anything growing in the ground is far more drought tolerant than anything in root trainers. So top left, you can see a bed after we'd finished weeding it and mulching it. We had a delivery of some mushroom compost and we dressed the beds with that. Top right, you can see some oaks coming on quite nicely there with the hoops. Bottom left, that's dogwood. And dogwood did quite well. It wasn't predated so much as anything prunus, so like the blackthorn seeds. And that's turned to a really good crop. We had to let it grow a second year, the dogwood, but now we've got a great crop of dogwood from that. And bottom right, you can see again the constant battle in 2021 with the weeds there. I'm really nifty with a hoe now. You get used to weeding with a hoe and getting the technique right. And my gardening skills actually in my garden have come on leaps and bounds since doing this, because you just get so used to weeding. I'm a lot more efficient now. Then this is a picture next of us just collecting seeds and berries locally. And then top right, seed stratification. So last growing season, I had things put in bags and I kept them in the fridge, thankfully by agreement from my wife, but things have kind of grown since then. So we've built ourselves an outdoor cage, which I'll show you in a second. But typically, I write on the bags when I've started the treatment, when they need to go from warm to cold, and when they're expected to be ready. And every weekend I go out there and have a sift through the bags, because sometimes they're a bit early, sometimes they're bang on time, sometimes they're late. But typically, bottom left, I think that's probably some hornbeam. Opening the bag, that was left a bit too long, but these would have been taken out and just put into root trainers. And another challenge we had up at the farm is deer coming along. We've had red deer there, we've got muntjac deer, and I think we've even got some Chinese water deer there as well. And it's soul destroying to process the seed and then grow these trees and then come there one day and see that loads of the tops are being cut off, because then unfortunately you end up with trees which are branching too low down and you've got to do some formative pruning. So that then resulted us in putting nets over again. But as you can see on the left there, the birch continued to grow, and then you've kind of got to, do we keep them under the net with the tops bending or growing through the net? So in the end, you can see we put some electric fencing around, which is the white tape around there. Currently, that seems to have done pretty well in terms of keeping things at bay. We haven't had any more predation or browsing. So that's the farm nursery. The home nursery comprises of a small greenhouse in the garden. And you can see top left there, when things were germinating, I was getting ready. It was nice in the winter to actually go and seek refuge in the greenhouse when it was snowing and do a bit of seed work in there. Like Ellie, top right, I've got some experimental air pruned beds. So that is some scaffold boards with some mesh underneath, and that did work really well. We grew some Gelder rose in there. Bottom left, you can see this is in the greenhouse, because things will chit and they will start to grow, and you've got to catch them at just the right time, put them into the root trainers, but that might be before the frost had finished. Now in the wild, I don't know whether that would kill off the seedlings, but in the greenhouse they were fine, they were protected, and also with birds coming along, they were protected in the greenhouse as well. Bottom right, that's just some pictures of some walnuts there we've got going into the root trainers. We use a mixture predominantly of the deep root trainers, but the maxis we use for acorns and other nuts. So then I needed a space to put all these root trainers, and so I got some blocks and some old pallets, painted them with some barn paint so they'd look nice in the garden, and then I put some nets over them as well, although the nets I haven't used that much from the first time we put them on, because actually those rails around them restrict you getting in there and moving things about. But that works quite well, and we've probably got about 1,500 trees growing. It's got a capacity of about 1,500 trees in that space there. You can see here, this is beginning of the first year with freshly pricked out seedlings going into these root trainers. And we've tried a mixture of them. You know, you've got the standard ones on the left there and the bottom right. These are more of a tray variety. I would say I haven't actually got a preference of which one to use. I'll see which one lasts the longest. And then this is a picture of things when they'd grown quite nicely. I'm really pleased and proud of that. You've got lots of lime down the front there. But as you can see, I quickly ran out of space, and there's a wood store over the back there on the left. So I had to start putting things on there. It just, you know, it sprouted, it got out of control. But then you can see also on the left there, I've got the seed storage box. So that's where we keep our seed bank. I've got a picture of that in a bit. But the thing with root trainers is you do have to water them in high summer, literally every day. So I stand there with a hose every morning with a coffee in the height of summer, giving everything a good watering. It's quite a skill actually to get root trainers watered, because you have to get the angle right, and that took a bit of playing. But what I found was the water wasn't going down the bottom of the cells. So in the end, I put down some fabric on the right here to kind of hold the water, so it would also capillary up from the bottom to draw the roots down. Now, if you leave, when your roots grow to the bottom of the root trainer, they will start to bind into that. Which I suppose is a bit like pruning roots. You pull them off and then you put them somewhere else. But to begin with, I'd say in the height of summer, that was pretty good. What I should have done this summer, because it was so hot, I should have put some shade netting up, which would have helped, because things did wilt really quickly because it was just so hot. Next up, we've got a picture of the top of some lime. I was really pleased. This year we had a lot of lime chitting. Last year we had literally none. So we had a good session of lime. And when you pick your lime seeds, pick them slightly green, not brown, because they should germinate more in the first year rather than having to wait to the second year. If you pick them brown, you'll have to wait till the second year. So this is the Tree Nursery seed bank. You will quickly find if you leave any kind of seed outside, and you've got mice anywhere, which they're literally everywhere, they will quickly come along and start chewing them up. And so this has got a door on it, and this keeps everything safe, and that is a lot of capacity, and it's built out of, you've got to have quite fine mesh because mice can get through holes quite quickly. Here's just a picture of some of our produce. You've got some rowan on the left there. I was just saying before you all joined to Ellie and Hilary, when you dig them up and you get that moment of, oh, look at the roots, that's a really nice moment when you dig it up and you say, God, look at that, it's like a prize marrow. Yeah, this is for the farmers market when we had people come to collect their trees a few days ago. And like Ellie, I am also a spreadsheet nerd. So this is something I put together because when you've got all the different treatments you've got warm, normally followed by cold, and you might have some pre-treatment. I put this together to say, right, if you've got all these different species, what do you actually need to start first? And when does it come around for its second treatment? When do I take it out of the airing cupboard and put it into the fridge or outside in the cold? So this allowed me to see kind of the way ahead in how to treat things. And if anybody wants a copy of this, they're more than welcome to. And this is set up, you can see under column L, for germination, ideally about the 1st of April. Although you could probably bring that earlier now because springs are so mild. Another thing I've been doing is going around to village halls and parish councils and schools and saying, okay, you've got a big field here, you're not using these margins, you could do some tree planting here. So that's me working with local space owners to say, this is a design I could do, and would you believe that this is actually done on Excel as well? And if anybody wants a copy of this, you just literally screen grab from Google Earth, and then you can drop and drag these trees over the top. So that's a planting thing we're going to do this winter. So to finish off, I suppose I'm quite lucky because I've done bare root in the field, but also root trainers as well. So advantages for bare root is low cost setup. You've got much less watering. We probably watered about 4 times this summer. You've got excellent and unlimited root growth. We're quite lucky because the soil we have is it's a mixture of clay and sand. So I recognise that sometimes if you're stuck with a piece of land and it's not ideally suited for growing, you might have to do a lot of soil improvement, but we were quite lucky. And also it gives you a place to plant out any cell-grown trees that you haven't been able to home after that first year of growth. Disadvantages is it's remote to water, so we had to have those tanks. It is harder on your back. In terms of actual physically doing the work, that you've got to get on your knees, or you've got to bend over, or work with the hoe and dig things up. So it is a lot more strenuous to do bare root. You're stuck with the soil condition as you pick up that piece of space. Weeding, you saw the problems we had with weeding. Predation, we've had deer, rabbits, birds and mice over there, so you've got to put some protection down. Location to you, this stuff all did take a lot of time. So with the garden, I literally walk outside and I can get straight out there and get to work. With the farm, I've got to go up there and come back. It's not like I can just pop out there and spend 10 or 15 minutes at it. And disadvantages for bare root is I've had limited success with smaller seeds. So your acorns, hazel, and the dogwood have done really well, but when I put down broadcast seeds of anything else, they've either been predated or they've been outcompeted by the weeds. So that was one thing. And then on to root trainers. You've got greater control over the environment. You can move these things about, you can water them, you can put them in shade or in the sun. And you can also protect them a lot easier as well from anything trying to predate it. They are easy to grow with. You do have better biosecurity because it's a completely controlled cell of soil. They're movable, so you can rearrange them. If you've got some taller growing at the front, you put them at the back. You can line them out. I actually had some cherry plum that was growing this winter, and by spring I actually planted them out in the bare root and they grew really well. There's much less weeding, but disadvantages is you've got initial cost to buy them. If you want a capacity of about 1,600, that costs you about £250. You've got the cost of the compost, you've got to use lots of plastics, and I've also realised that plants have a happy zone in terms of being too wet or too dry, and that's a very small margin in a little cell of soil, especially when you've got a 2-foot plant trying to grow out the top of it. Trainers will need replacing. Watering is a chore in the summer. It's every day, if not twice a day when it's dry. And then, of course, the least favourite part I found is cleaning all of those cells at the end of the growing season. I've got to the point, I've asked people what you do, and some people said just get a pressure washer on them, keep them in the trays and pressure wash them. And then this is us at the farmers market with people coming along to collect their trees. That day we gave out 300. It was also a point to say, if you want to volunteer to plant trees or grow trees, come along. And that's the end of my talk. I don't know how I did with time, but I hope that was okay and you found it useful.
That's absolutely brilliant, James. Thank you so much. That's fine for time as well. Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Lots of useful tips there. Obviously, we're recording the session, so if you want to go back and revisit both the talks, you will be able to do so. So now we can take some questions. So as we've said in the chat, please do use the raised hand option in the reactions, or you can put questions in the chat. We do have some questions come in on the chat already. Let's just have a look. We've got a question from Claire, horticultural student, for you, Ellie, about where you source the compost from. Claire, did you want to read out your couple of questions, or are you happy for me to do that? Don't know if Claire's there now. Is she able to unmute, Sam? Sam, could you unmute Claire, please?
That should be done.
I don't mind if you read out the question. Sorry, I probably had a lot in there. Hope I didn't ask you any questions. Apologies if it's a lot.
So yeah, the first one, Ellie, is where you source the compost, and then do they need seed treatments pre-sowing?
Sorry, I can't unmute myself. I just had to ask Sam to do it. We tried various composts, and the one that we settled on was one that they were using at Lancaster Uni. It's from, I think the company's called Fertile Fibre. It's quite expensive, but it's really good. It's really fine, and it's all organic, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's called Fertile Fibre, and you can buy it in big ton bags, so you don't have loads of the individual plastic bags as well. Second question. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it in the. What was the second question? Sorry.
So do they need seed treatments pre-sowing, and then what size typically are the saplings when they're planted out?
Okay. So in terms of treatment, for most of them, for things like the nuts, like the acorns and the hazelnuts, we just sow them straight away, and they're fine. They just start growing up in spring. Anything that's in a berry, we mash the berries to get the seeds out, and they tend to sit each batch in a communal plant pot over winter, and then in spring, if you sow them, then they start to grow up. Last year I tried putting some blackthorn in a warm place for a month before they went outside for the winter, again as like a communal batch in a pot. Some of them sat under the towel rail in my bathroom to stay warm for a month, and then they went outside, but I didn't do that with all of them, and some of them still grew quite well, for those that didn't get that warm treatment. The only thing that I've really done to the book has been for your birch seeds and your alder seeds. Though any that I collected, I just kept each batch in a paper bag over winter, to let the seeds drop out of the catkins and the cones, and then in spring you have to soak them for 48 hours, then put them in the fridge for 28 days, and then you sow them, and then they start to germinate really quickly and quite evenly, because that's a lot of what this preparation is. It's to get more of your seeds to germinate at a more even rate, so you're not waiting a few years for some of them to germinate. More of them germinate in the first year. So this was something I wanted to ask James as well, but we can come on to that, because I didn't put anything in my freezer or my fridge really, and I'm wondering if maybe I should have done. What size typically are the saplings when planted out? We will be planting ours out when they are probably after about 2 years of growth, when they're between 40 and 60 centimetres, about the size that you would, well actually ours are cell grown, so it might be 30, 40 centimetres, which is typically what you would get from a tree nursery. How often are they potted on before being planted out? We're going to be doing it a year, so I'm thinking, especially some of the species that grow quite a bit bigger, like your oaks, I think we're going to have to pot them on in spring. So they were sown in seed trays, and once they germinate, we then put them in the pots that we'd split in 4, and I think they've possibly grown as much as they'll grow in their smaller pots, so I think we might pot them on in spring. So that's kind of a 2-stage potting on process, and then we'll put them in their final homes in the woodlands. But I quite like your idea, James, of maybe starting them in cells or pots or whatever, and then putting them in the ground once they're less likely to be devoured by quite as many species of wildlife.
You can kind of hedge your bets. So if you get a glut of something, keep half in the trainers, put half in the ground.
Yeah, it's good to experiment with these things. Where do the saplings get planted? They will be all over. We plant trees. We don't own any land as Ribble Rivers Trust, so we have to work with landowners. So that can be council, so it can be council land like public parks, but most of the time it's on private farmland, and it's often creating little like corridors along rivers of trees. But it's all over Lancashire, really. Hopefully that answers those questions.
Thank you. And you've got a question for James yourself, Ellie, I notice. Did you want to ask?
Yeah. So the techniques you use of putting the seeds in warm places, in the fridge, in the freezer. There are a lot of species that, if you don't do that, can take 2 winters to germinate, aren't there? Like your hawthorn and dog rose. And have you found that you get them germinating after 1 winter if you go through that process?
Some seeds, when you read the book, I normally go to Tree Seed Online, and if you look at Tree Seed Online, for every single species, and there's all of the native species, but loads of non-native as well, but they give you methods of how to treat them. And I wouldn't say I've gained a year by doing the seed treatment, but certainly it's probably increased the germination rates. With things like hawthorn, I think the book says you've just got to wait 2 winters for it to germinate. And the same with holly as well, it's 2 winters. I don't think I've gained a winter by doing it by the book, and to be honest, I started by the book, but I've just been a bit more relaxed this year, so I've left it out in the cold rather than putting it in the fridge. Then you're at the mercy of the temperatures outside. But I think it's good to feel that ebb and flow of the cold in the night and over the winter. Put yourself in I suppose the shoes of nature. It probably just feels right for it to tease out the germination.
Yeah, that's what we've been going with. And yeah, we figured, but well, I mean, our winters are possibly not going to be that cold going forward, or maybe they will.
Yeah, well, it's 10 degrees today, and it probably goes down to about 5 tonight, so that's good. One mistake I did make in terms of, you read some guide and it says the Forestry Commission did a thing about what temperature you cold it at. You put it down to cold, and it had minus in there, and I thought, oh, that's the freezer, so I stuck it in the freezer. It kills them. Right. So just fridge, not freezer, because they don't like being frozen. I mean, freezer goes down to -20, whereas you think out in nature, the top 2 inches of soil probably just sits around freezing to probably maximum -5 at the top.
Yeah. Okay, I might just keep leaving them exposed to the elements then, and see what happens.
Thank you. So you both had requests for the spreadsheets, which is great. So the best way for people to obtain those is to email you directly, I would imagine. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I put my email address on the chat here. So have a look down the chat and you can see my address. Email me and let me know what you want, and I'll send anyone what they want. Happy to share.
That's great. There's a question from Alice Massey. Did you want to read your question, Alice? If she could be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm completely new to this, so I'm just wondering, what would you recommend somebody to start with? I mean, acorns and hazels seem the first ones. What others are easy?
Acorns are really good. They're really easy to collect, and they have a high germination rate. Hazels are hard to collect because you kind of have to get them before they fall from the tree, otherwise they'll just get eaten. And we found there's about a 2-week window when it's kind of the right time to go and harvest them from trees. But it's very therapeutic to do so. I really like crab apples because they're quite easy to, if you can find crab apple trees, that is, they're quite easy to harvest, and it's quite fun to smash the apples open and get the seeds out, and it just smells lovely. But they seem to have quite a high germination success rate, and they're lovely little saplings, although they seem quite I had mass die off of them, and I think they got too wet, so I think the roots rotted.
Mine did the same.
Yeah, do you think it's because they got too wet?
They just didn't do well this year. I don't know why. Previous year they were fine, but this year I can't explain why. They just didn't like it, the crab apple.
I had a forest of them, and then most of them died, and it was very sad. Blackthorn are quite nice to do as well, because providing you don't react badly to blackthorn trees, because some people react quite badly to them. It's quite fun to collect them, and it's fun to mash the berries, and they seem to germinate quite well as well. Generally, the bigger the seeds, I think they're better to start with. Saying that, alder are quite good. Quite a lot of them germinate, and they're quite low maintenance. But sometimes the things with the tiny seeds, like holly or blackthorn, dog rose, they're less fun because they're really tiny seeds, and also if they take 2 winters to germinate, you're waiting a long time. I don't know, what do you think, James?
Well, I would say I'd say hedge your bets, give everything a go. So when you come to collect seeds, I'll admit not all of my stuff is locally sourced. It's lovely to think that I could go out there and there'd be an ancient woodland with all the trees available for me to go and collect the seed, but that's unfortunately just not the reality. My ancient woodland here is covered with sycamore. That's what I'm stuck with. So I buy seed from Tree Seed Online and Forest Start. But I would say, so if you want to start now, you can still do that because there's still seed available that if you want to buy. In terms of collecting out there, you haven't got much available, probably apart from some hawthorn will be left on the trees and some holly. But I would say hedge your bets because the more you collect of the different species, the more luck you're going to have somewhere along the line with something. I would say rowan is a lovely thing to start with. Anything prunus, I've got such a respect and admiration for anything prunus. So that is your wild cherry, your cherry plum, your blackthorn, I can't think of any of the others now, but prunus is a lovely thing to see because you get the hard pips, and then you see them in spring, and you can just start to see the shell split. And then as soon as it splits and you get the root coming out, that's when you would sift through that bag, pick them out and pop them in the root trainer, and they'll grow really, really well, as long as but still protect them from mice. Once you put them in that root trainer, they're still susceptible to being eaten. Lime, apparently lime is the nurseryman's nightmare, or lady, sorry, to be correct. But I would say collect lime now, because the longer you keep it, it will germinate in future years. And anything, the tip I picked up was lime and anything winged, any winged seeds, pick before they get brown, because you're more likely to get germination the following spring. If you leave them for longer, it'll take 2 winters if you pick them brown. Then yeah, your small seeds, go for some birch, go for some alder, put it in the bag. As Ellie said, there's all the instructions out there on Tree Seed Online. There's also many different resources, TCV, and
yeah,
of course
we use that, James. That's really, really useful. TCV.
Yeah, because that is about a nursery, how to do, literally sow the nursery beds, treat the seeds, etc. And not forgetting the wonderful book, which I've got a copy of it here somewhere. What's the book that was sent as part of the More Trees?
Tree Growers Guide.
Tree Growers Guide. So that's got all your instruction there as well. That's super. Walnuts are amazing to see. When a walnut splits and that root comes out, it looks like something out of Aliens. So that's quite a one. But I would say just have a go at everything. There it is. That's a really good guide.
It's really fun. It's really addictive, and you learn so much very quickly. So I think I agree. Just have a go at everything. And if you do a range of species, actually, if some don't do well but others do, it won't be as frustrating that some of them haven't done well, because you'll still have all these little trees.
You've also got to find a home for these things, and if you've got 1,000 oaks and nothing else, you're quite limited in terms of what you can achieve. Whereas if you just try lots of everything, then you're more than likely going to find decent homes for the majority of things, rather than just having one species.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'm just going to look at some more questions. Alice Wardle, are you there? Alice, would you like to read out your question? Seems to be a bit of delay with unmuting at the moment. I'm not sure if Alice is there. She's asking about, you're there?
No, she can't unmute.
I don't think it's here at the moment.
Okay. She was asking, where have you found as a good resource in terms of growing tips? I mean, obviously the Tree Growers Guide is, and TCV you mentioned, didn't you? Is there any other resources you would recommend from your own personal experiences?
I mainly looked at TCV, Conservation Volunteers. I put the link in the chat. And then just a bit of trial and error, because that was written in Ireland. But even after one growing season, there's lots of things that I've learned that I think if I implement will increase success next year. Yeah, I don't know if there'll be a guide out there that'll tell you every little tip and trick, but yeah. But you use different sources, haven't you, James?
Yeah, so there's Tree Seed Online. That's really good, and that's what I've based my spreadsheet on, with the different periods and any pre-treatment. There's other Facebook groups as well. So there's Tree Growers UK, I think, is one of them, and then also Tree Planting UK. Because they've got bigger numbers, so there's a bigger resource to draw on. But if you've got any specific questions, I found that sometimes posting on there. There's also the Scottish Nurseries one as well. I can't remember what it is, but there's something similar.
Yeah.
What's it? Sorry.
Scottish Small Tree Network.
That's it. Yeah.
I think we might have someone from there tonight, and I think I saw Andy Robinson.
Ah, the great Andy Robinson.
I think so.
They're really helpful, and I've put on questions on there, and they've been really, really helpful. So I'd say there's different Facebook forums out there. Have a look through for the different groups. They're a really good resource.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. There's a question from Emily B. Is Emily there?
Hi, can you hear me okay? So there was, I think it was two, but the first one was, other than the spreadsheets for your seed stratification and processing, how do you keep track of all the jobs that need doing to set up a community tree nursery, particularly, Ellie, if you've got 3 on the go, or if you delegated that to each nursery? But I know I'm literally about to start, and someone has suggested using Trello, which I don't know how many people are familiar, but it's a kind of like online pin board, if you like, to keep track of all the different things. So any suggestions on that would be welcome.
I think because each nursery needed different things doing, only one of them we needed to set up from scratch and set up all the infrastructure, and 2 of them had most things in there already. But I think it was probably more of like a Gantt chart in a spreadsheet, probably, that I could just colour code when something had been done at each nursery to see how they were all progressing. But I can imagine Trello working really well as well, when you can tick things off, and anything that you like to keep track of how you're doing with things, I think.
I'd like to say I was proactive, but I think probably more than half the time I was reactive to what needed to be done. You can kind of turn up and have a look around and think, right, what do I need to do now? And 2021 it was weeding predominantly, and 2022 it was watering predominantly. But certainly in the spring, my top tip is, if you've got all your different bags with all the different germination on, that spreadsheet is useful to say, right, I need to put a tray of the birch seed out now because they're ready. But it's such a fine judgment call to say, right, I'm looking in this bag and it's ready to put into a tray to germinate. I probably make a hard job of it, but what I do is I look through the bag, see what's germinating, take those bags out, and then I literally empty them out, pick out the germinating seeds, put them into the root trainer. If there's just a few, you let them grow, and they'll get too long a root on them. But if there's a good batch and it looks like it's coming on, then I'll take them out, take the germinating seed out when they've got a root on them about centimetre to 2. Any more than that, you get a bit tricky to put in the ground without damaging the root. And this is with kind of medium seeds that you can pick up. Any of the finer seeds, like your alder and your birch, you've just got to put them in trays, let them germinate, and then prick them out from there. But any of the seeds that you can pick up, like tilia is perfect, and field maple, I pick them out and then put them on. So I kind of let the seeds dictate to me it's like a little nest of birds saying, I need to have something done now. And then up at the farm nursery, I suppose it's a case of turning up and seeing what needs doing. Mainly it's just stopping things get eaten and keeping them watered and protecting them.
Thank you. And the other one was sort of basic tools you'd recommend to start up with. I know you both talked about the boxes to put everything in, or the root trainers or whatever. Is there anything else in terms of I'm applying for funding and trying to say to my local council, this is the kind of things I need? I know Ellie, you talked about using reclaimed stuff, so putting a call out for pots and things like that. Is there anything else you'd recommend that would be useful for volunteers to have, particularly when you were talking about like the health and safety, like having to do a risk assessment or managing if people come along, all those things?
Yeah, that's a good point. You do need a risk assessment if you're going to have well, you should have one anyway, but especially if there's going to be volunteers helping you out. A big thing is making sure that wherever your seeds are going to be when they're either being stored or being sown, is it needs to be mouse proof, because they will find them. So rodent mesh is pretty key, I would say. And just some basic hand tools, like a trowel. It depends how you want to grow them. We've only grown them cell grown, and so getting the pots for free from local plant nurseries has been, and seed trays has been a huge cost saving thing for us, as well as environmental. If you can source some good quality pallets that you can build stuff out of, that's really handy. What else do you need? You don't need much, to be honest.
Watering cans, I've just thought of that. Things like that, you know?
Yeah. If you're able to hook up a water butt to somewhere nearby that's collecting water where you can harvest it from a roof, that's really good. So if you're using tap water, but yeah, a watering can is pretty essential. I'm trying to think what else. I don't know, James, what am I missing? Loads of things, I imagine.
So thinking about root trainer, barrow, you need a barrow. That's good for mixing soil up. And I then put a couple of bits of wood across the top to fill up the root trainers. So it's a good implement there. Netting. Look for some netting, because if you get some birds which are particularly hungry in spring, they'll come and peck the tops off, which is a sad thing. Watering can. Then up at the nursery, the farm nursery, sorry, forks, spades, a digging hoe. I was introduced to a digging hoe. Look up for those. It's basically a big hoe which has got a basic spade on the end, and it lets you weed so much better. And that's kind of a heavy duty thing. But also get other hoes, because you get ones with like the little crook on them, and those are good when you dig your drills for planting your acorns or whatever in straight rows. You do that. Mesh, get yourself a couple of sheets of different size mesh, because when you're processing the seeds, you'll need to sieve them through certain things. So I Yeah, when you've got a certain seed, you've got to separate out the pulp and the skin. It's useful if you've got a different number of different size sieves to go through. Another thing, it's a bit random, but when you're processing seeds, look up it's kind of what is it? You put it on the end of a drill and it turns around and it mixes up either plaster or tiling adhesive. It's kind of that kind of whisk thing. And I've found if you've got a bucket full of hawthorn seeds, putting that in there, if you've got some tough skin on it, some tough flesh, that really saves you a lot of labour work of mushing it up and going around, because it's literally like a washing machine to separate and clean those seeds up. That's really useful. Then up at the nursery, either fencing, you've got to look at fencing. If you're out in the open, I put electric fence around to keep deer away. Then off the back of that, you've got to have a charger and a solar panel, which I've rigged something together. Then netting again with the blue 25 millimeter pipes, if you want to put that in there. That's probably it, I'd say, I can think of now. I'm sure there's plenty I've missed, but...
Thank you very much.
Our seed processing system, berry processing system, is buckets, rolling pins to mash them, and various size colanders and sieves to separate the seeds out from the pulp. Yeah, so it's very low tech, but it works well. I like your idea, James. I'm going to try that. Buckets are really useful to have as well, especially if you're working with volunteers, so they can just grab a bucket of compost to work with.
That's the other thing as well, actually. You've got to think of when you come to dig these trees up, how are you going to package them to get them off? And I must admit, if we ever get a delivery of something and it comes in a plastic bag, I just stuff it in a bag, and that's what I've been using to dish trees out to give to people. So think, how are you going to package this stuff afterwards? You ball of string, that kind of thing. And you need labels as well. Think about labeling. I saw Ellie, I was really impressed that you've eaten so many ice lollies and ice creams.
Some friends, I have various friends doing that for me. The labels didn't last very long on them. I've had to move to plastic, sadly.
Yeah.
But,
I went straight for plastic. I'm less eco credentials, I'm afraid. But...
they don't work.
Permanent markers. Sharpies, your permanent markers. You'll need about 5 of them, because you'd be surprised how many you get through and how many you lose and find later.
Thank you. So we've got lots and lots and lots more questions. We've only got time for a few more probably, but we will save the chat and hope to get back to you all. We'll work something out to answer more of them after the event. There's one from Alice Massey. Are you there, Alice?
Yes, I'm here. I'm aware that there is an awful lot of legislation around seeds and planting. So some seed growers have to have a license and things. Is it worth learning about that? I mean, I'm aware if you're giving trees, then you don't need to have that. But if you're selling trees and or doing planting in somebody else's land, do you need to think about the regulations of this?
Something that we need to look into personally, and another thing to be aware of is whether you've got biosecurity certification. So if for example, we plant a lot of trees, we apply for funding through the Forestry Commission's English Woodland Creation Offer and other kind of funding streams. And so for those, the trees can only be bought from nurseries that have got that certification. So to be able to plant our own trees in those particular schemes, we need to get our Community Tree Nursery certified. So there is quite a lot of considerations like that. We haven't sorted any of that yet, so I can't say for definite, I'm afraid, but it probably is something to read into. Have you looked into anything like that, James?
I started with FRM. So I've registered our nursery with the Forestry Commission, and the FRM is mainly about the difference is if you've got FRM certified material, you can then use that for grant funded planting. And FRM, if I was to summarise it, it means that you've got traceability. So you record where you've picked it from, and you keep track of what is where all the way to the point where you actually give it out. So I've stopped going through the formal process of FRM because that's really really intensive. There's lots of paperwork to do, but I'm still sticking with the principle of it. But I don't need to stick to it because I'm not. I say everything is not for forestry purposes. So as long as you say that, you don't have to do the FRM, but do keep a track of what goes where. Plant passports. I did ask when you need a plant passport. If you are giving out trees, you don't need plant passports. If you are posting them or selling them over the internet, you do need plant passports. The thing I need to check on is whether if you sell them person to person, in other words, they come to you and they buy them off you. I'm not sure whether you need to give out plant passports there, but do check about plant passports.
Does it? How far does a tree need to go before it needs a passport, if that makes sense? So we plant all our trees ourselves.
Yeah.
So we know exactly where they've gone and it's all within the Ribble catchment or Lancashire. Would they need passports?
No, because I think it's all with, you're dealing first hand with the person, in other words, from the nursery to the landowner. Whereas if you post anything or you deal with people over the internet, that is when you need a plant passport.
Okay.
If you Google plant passports, there is information out there on when do you need a plant passport, because that's another. If we needed them, to be honest, I wouldn't do it because that's a whole nother layer of cost and complexity and admin.
Okay, if we can move on to Roger and Kate, or Roger or Kate.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. It's just Roger, obviously. Hopefully. Our strategy for our very embryonic nursery is that we've given seeds out to the local community and asked them to simply put them in a pot and grow them over a period of time, well, until they germinate, and then we'll take them back. And the idea then is that we'll put them into raised beds in our nursery and grow them on until such time as they're ready to plant out. What are the pitfalls of that approach, and how likely are we to get success with it in terms of things like what's the right time to plant them on into the beds, and what's the right time to take them out and go and put them in the final locations?
I can see how it would work. I think there might be a lot of variation in how well different people look after them. So you might have some that are absolutely thriving and some that are really not doing very well. So it'd be quite hard to know how many trees you are going to get, but at the same time, it should reduce the workload on you initially. But then in some ways it might be double the effort because someone's had to plant them and then you then have to plant them yourself in your bed. I think it could be a good method. It could be a good way of getting lots of people interested and involved. It might be that, say you had a load of acorns, some after 1 year might be huge and some might need 2 years to get quite big. It might be less even growth rates because they've been grown in lots of different locations, which might mean that you just need to plan 2 years ahead of when you actually want trees in the ground rather than maybe 1 year ahead. I think it'll just take a little bit more planning, but I don't see why it wouldn't work well. What about you, James?
I think it's a good idea. When I've got my bank of seeds, typically you get a batch saying I'm ready now, and I would actually invite people to a central place to say bring your pots now, and everybody takes that seed and either pricks it out or takes a tray to germinate and prick it, or to take a tray away to germinate, or indeed split a tray apart, prick it out and to put it in root trainers or pots, because that way you're dealing with the seed at the right time when it's ready. Kind of a centralized, control. I'd say one thing is biosecurity. Get people to make sure things are off the ground, because if a plant pot is on the ground, any number of things, any kind of bacteria or viruses can get into that soil, or even seeds. If you've got a invasive kind of species in someone's garden, that could drop seeds into that pot. and then that could go back to your central point and then get dispersed there. In terms of biosecurity, think of different spheres. So I've got the home nursery and the farm nursery, and think of movement of materials. What you're proposing there is mixing so many different pathways in different environments. And in terms of biosecurity, unless you keep everything off the ground, that's quite high risk. And timing, you might have someone growing in the shade, someone growing in the sun, someone growing in a lovely little heat spot. So you're going to get trees come through at different rates, and I suppose that's harder to control when it all comes back. But in terms of planting into the soil, if you're getting things out of pots to put it in soil, I'd say as long as you can water it and mulch it, you can probably put it into the ground anywhere up to about May, or put it in over winter is perfect. Winter is perfect to put anything in the ground, but in the summer you don't want to be starting to put things in the ground unless you can continually water them.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you both. We're just sort of about out of time now, sadly. Thank you so much, Ellie and James, for answering the questions. There are lots more. We'll do our best to go through them. We'll save the chat and go through them, and get back to you in due course. So thank you so much, everyone, for the fascinating comments and questions, and for interacting in such a lively and positive manner. I'll be emailing you a link to the recording as well, and also some information about the biosecurity grant that Fellowship of the Trees are involved in delivering on behalf of Trees Outside Woodland programme. So for those of you who haven't come across that funding, I'll be including a link to the FAQs document and the application form, so you can find out a bit more if you need to improve your biosecurity for your tree nursery. So I think that's it for now. Do keep an eye on our social media platforms, Fellowship of the Trees, and I'll be in touch with dates for the forthcoming events in due course. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Ellie, so much. That's wonderful.
Thank you.